Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the pilot broadcast of the ISCAST, the official podcast of the International Society of Caricature Artists. I will be your moderator slash host, Nolan Harris, and just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect from this podcast, we will be broadcasting bi-monthly. That's 2 times a month. We will be featuring interviews with members, non-members, caricature artists in the illustration community, and we will also be featuring different snippets from other podcasters out there, specifically one by the name of Ali Tome, who has been working on her own caricature-related podcast that we will be featuring on here as much as we possibly can. That being said, this is our pilot episode, and it did not go without a few technical hiccups. We have a great interview with Tom Faraci, but there is a little bit of a cackling noise in the background. So it kind of flickers on and off. If you guys can tolerate that, you will definitely not regret it. It's a great interview with Tom. He has a lot of fun things to say about his caricature convention experiences. So I hope you guys enjoy, and we're going to kick it off right now. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us for our debut podcast. We're just going to kick it off now with the first question. You went to your first convention in Las Vegas, and I was hoping maybe you could kind of share your first time convention experience with us. What was that like?
Yeah, Vegas for me was, I didn't know what to expect going into it. When I started doing caricatures at Cedar Point in Ohio, that was the first year that the ISCA convention was in Kalahari in 2009 in Sandusky. And I missed it due to a lack of funds, despite it being right in my own backyard. But some of the visiting artists who came to check the park and go to the convention were kind of like chastising me for not making it. You know, it's like, hey, it's right here. You guys got to go. You got to go. You got to go. And I couldn't do it, and I didn't realize the significance of it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to go. I'm going to take time off from work. I'm going to go to the next one in Vegas. So that was in 2010. And, I don't know what I was expecting. I sort of showed up there with all these, just every art supply I could dig up. I had paints I've never used before. I brought my laptop and Photoshop on it, and pencils and pens and different papers and stuff. I'm just like, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to use this as a chance to, like, learn new materials and just figure out what I want to do. And it wasn't until I actually sat down to start doing, like, these drawing in mediums that I wasn't very familiar with that I'm like, oh, man, I'm way in over my head. So, besides that, too, the other thing that made Vegas a memorable experience for me was because it was Vegas, and I'd never been to Vegas before. So when I was planning on going and, experiencing the convention, I'm also telling my friends, I said, hey, guys, I'm going to Vegas for an art convention. Do you guys want to go to Vegas with me? They're like, yeah. And so I went with, 3 or 4 other friends who were going to see Vegas for a week. And so I was dividing my time up between being at the convention and being on the Vegas Strip and going to the casinos and shows and clubs and drinking and drawing. And it was very, very disorganized, and needless to say, by the time the whole convention was over, I didn't have really, a lot to show for it. And when I was in the room, I felt like just such a fly on the wall because I was familiar with artists because I've been following their work for the past year or so, and it just felt like I was thrown into just this convention full of celebrities and just monsters of art, and I'm just like, just mesmerized by all the artwork being created around me, and just sort of like shunning myself from everyone because I couldn't dare speak to these people who, I recognize and are influential to me, but, in my head, they're like these celebrities. And I remember thinking that year that going to that convention as a first-year artist, it was sort of like if I were to have started a band in my garage with a couple of friends, and then suddenly I'm thrown into a battle of the bands with the Rolling Stones and Metallica,
Oh
and
man,
like we got to compete against these guys, and I was just like so not prepared for that.
that's a
But
really that's a good analogy you made there. I think that first convention for a lot of people is kind of like sensory overload, and it doesn't help that you had bright lights, beautiful women, all of this stuff outside. Not to mention your friends kind of like pulling you back and forth. I can't imagine how your recovery time was after that.
yeah, so I was right after the convention. I got sort of dumped back into the real world, and I started off my day job again, and it was something that I knew I wasn't really satisfied with. It was just some job I was working retail, not art related at all, besides some graphic design work, and it's I think it was partially that um, convention in Vegas that sort of got me to start thinking, okay, I got to get out of this job and back into doing characters, back into this world where I feel like I belong. And you were mentioning like sensory overload, which is a really good way to put it. And that never like lessens up. After 5 years, it's still always
Oh yeah.
very just you're being bombarded from all angles with artwork and inspiration, and just every single year it's this feeling you go in there where you're like, all right, I'm going to show them what I'm made of. But then you see other people's work, and you're like, oh crap, I can't do that.
Well, it's
but
crazy. Yeah,
I want to.
it's crazy because every year you like focus on getting better and better, but you tend to forget that all these giants are getting better and better too. So it's like
Right.
you're like, "Oh man, I'm so proud of what I just made. I can't wait to show this off to everyone." And then you look at everyone else's and you're like, "Oh, they were practicing too." Oh,
Yeah, but at the same time, I look forward to that.
totally.
I'm like, man, I can't wait to see what this artist does to top their work from this year.
Oh, I
I
know.
look forward to seeing what they're putting out.
Were there any artists in Vegas that initially grabbed you? Maybe artists that you hadn't heard of before. Like, was there anyone specifically that inspired you, or that you still follow to this very day?
Um, yeah, I'm kind of trying to think back. When I went into Vegas, I knew a handful of artists from working at Cedar Point. So I knew Natalie Yeckley and Derek Brennan,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew a few of them from the forum too. I signed up a little bit before I went to ISCA and played around in the shooting range on the forum.
Oh
So
yeah.
I got a few drawings from Marcus Dakota and Kev Jackson, and so I was excited to see them there. And Eric Goodwin too, who I was familiar with from Caricaturama
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook. Sean Gardner I had met the year before when he came to the Sandusky ISCA. So there were those artists who I was sort of familiar with to some degree that I sort of watched and kept an eye on. But I was also very familiar with Chris Chua's work and Aaron Philby's work. And I remember just seeing them there, and like those are the guys who I'm just like, oh man, these are the guys whose work I've been following, and I can't go talk to them because that's so weird, So,
Which is kind of funny because they started out the same way you did. I mean, those guys were all theme park artists for the same company, just different places.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it was those guys who I was sort of keeping an eye on and watching and seeing what work they were coming up with, but. Again, when it comes to Vegas, I wasn't in the room as much as I have been in past years. That's sort of the one where I learned, like, oh yeah, if I want to get anything done, I have to be utilizing this 24-hour-a-day drawing room. I can't keep leaving and coming back and trying to get stuff done. So it was pretty much the artist that I was familiar with that I had just mentioned that I was watching and just sort of seeing what was going up on their walls. And funny story, actually, Yuta Hamna won the Golden Nosy that year, if I remember correctly, and my little crappy dinky wall was right up next to his.
Oh man.
So I became familiar with his work as being a lot better than mine.
Yeah, that's always a tough card to be dealt when you get to the venue and you just see all these numbers and tape, and then that one piece, the first piece next to you shows up and you're like, oh crap, I'm next to this guy. Oh man, can I move? Can I move over here? I'll take this I'll take this dark corner if I need to. I don't care. As long as I'm not next to Tomo or as long as I'm not
I
next to Brian Oakes or you know.
Yeah, and I've had walls like next to Derek Brennan and Nate Kapnicki before, and I'm just like, ah, crap, I'm up against these guys. Like, no one's gonna look at my stuff, you know.
Well,
Uh,
I guess the
but
best news.
even that first year, I wasn't even like I was oblivious to the fact that my work was being outshined by the work around it. It wasn't until years later that I realized, you know, what these artists are capable of, and what is, um, what's capable of winning and placing an award. And that first year, I was just like, look at me, I got a wall, like I got art up on the wall.
I
That was
know.
it. And I had blinders to like everything else around it. So it wasn't until after he won that I'm like, oh crap, mine was right up against his wall. No wonder no one said anything.
No,
But
what I always try to compare it to is looking at all of those walls is like staring into a flashlight. You look at the flashlight, it's bright, it's beautiful, it's pretty, but then for 30 or 40 seconds afterwards, you can't see anything. So you like
yeah,
you look
that's
at Nate Kapnicki's one, you're like, whoa, oh my God, look at how he exaggerated that or distorted that. And then after you look at his wall, you're like, oh man, wow, I can't see anything now. And you just end up missing things. And
yeah, that's another brilliant analogy right there, and that's what makes voting so difficult every
yeah,
year because I know like year after year, I vote kind of based on my gut.
yeah,
I'll go around the room one time and I'll just sort of look at everything as much as I can without putting anything down on the tally sheet. And then I'll go around, I'll try and remember the ones that stuck out to me, and then I'll go back and check them out, and I'll mark my votes that way. But it isn't until after like the award ceremony, and even after like I'm home from the convention, that I start seeing the work pop up online, and I'm like, oh, where was that wall? Who did that work? And I just totally like, there's so much awesome this stuff created at these conventions, and it's
I know,
impossible
man.
to take it all in.
There's not enough hours in the day. I mean, you want to walk around that convention hall like 8 or 9 times. I mean, to this day, I've only been on the board for 2 years, but when I see people vote and I'm there collecting, their votes, there are people that walk in the minute voting starts and they are there the minute voting ends and they still haven't put everything down. And it's heartbreaking because I'm like, man, these guys are really looking at everything and they don't have enough time. So it's such a man. There's just not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, it's a challenge to vote, but I think that also um, lends itself to. I mean, the artists themselves creating the art need to be aware of what they're up against in the when it comes time to vote and the time limit there, and
Yeah,
they got to create something. They got to create that piece that's going to jump out and catch someone's attention first.
yeah,
And I think that's all part of the competition.
totally. You got a time limit for drawing. You got a time limit for voting. If we didn't have time constraints, then people would just run wild, and they would take forever to draw everything. Rob Wren would probably spend like 4 days painting your lips. And
Right.
and that's why that's why you've got like 3.5 days of drawing. That's why you've got 3 hours of voting. It's just yeah,
Well, I'll tell you, it's because of those time constraints that I am as productive as I am at those conventions. Like those are where I put out what I consider to be like my best work
yeah,
because I try to kind of capture that energy and bring it back home with me and put it into my studio work. But it's something about that energy in that room. That's what pushes me to, start out drawing at like 10 a.m. and work on it until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then be like, okay, I got to call this done because I got more work to do. Instead of just like, no, I'm done with this for now and move on to the next thing.
right.
If I'm doing that, like in my day-to-day life, I'll just have like a bunch of half-completed pieces, over the course of a week, and it's that like that drive that really fuels the type of artwork that we're able to create.
Yeah, I agree. So hey, okay, you got your start at the Vegas convention, and then there's been some conventions in between then and now. Which, by the way, I want to mention this to all the ISCAST listeners out there. Tom Faraci this year won third place, outstanding body situation, and I mean I don't like to take much credit, but I think some of the credit goes to me and Chris Galvin for just having great bodies to work with. But Tom actually won an award this year, so congratulations to you for that. And
thank you.
And since the Vegas convention, you've been attending yearly, and last year we had a really awesome event called the Art Fight, which kind of carried over from a convention that took place in the past that wasn't ISCA related, called CrippleCon, where we would have multiple artists compete against one another to depict a certain subject matter, and the last man standing became the champ. And in 2013, that guy was you.
Yeah, that's correct.
And he's got a belt to prove it, which you wore pretty much every day after winning that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was one of the few opportunities that I'd get to sort of show that off. So I had to make sure I had it. I was the people's champ. I had to represent the people. I had to show up with that belt, every day for them to, no. Plus, it got me a lot of drawings, so that's cool too.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I remember the one Marcus did of you. Rob.
Yeah, I got it hanging up on my wall. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh man, that thing was a beaut. So tell us a little bit about that experience, because that was a pretty new thing for us to do at ISCA, and you'd been attending these conventions, and the icebreaker is kind of like that's the day for everyone to like, hey man, I haven't seen you in a year. Have you been this and that? And then we bring this event in where it's like, all right, guess what? We're trying to get those creative juices flowing. Let's get it started now. And you just dove right in, man. What was that like for you?
It was really, really surreal. Like, I mean, that's not something that you can just necessarily train for, It's kind of, my thought of it is everyone just sort of goes in and hopes for the best.
Yeah.
I did not expect to win. I wasn't even going to compete, but I ended up, that was the year, there was a sign-up sheet, and then there was like a guaranteed buy-in.
Right.
And my spot was paid for me as a gift. My friend Natalie Yeckley, she bought me a ticket into the art fight, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll compete. And I wasn't expecting much because I don't know what I can do when I'm up in front of that easel with that kind of pressure.
Right.
And even when I'm watching other artists and they get like a subject, I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I don't know what I'd draw if I got this subject. Like, racking my brain, but something about just being up there, and again, like that time limit, that pressure, that constraint, it just sort of triggers something. I was like, that sounds dumb. All right, that's the first thing I'm going to do, and just hope it sticks.
It's like drawing with adrenaline.
What's that?
It's like drawing with adrenaline.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta go with your gut. Like, that's all you can do. And I think that kind of comes from the years of retail art and drawing live. You sort of have to have that knack for being fast and just being funny on the fly. And sitting down and thinking about it, you can overthink yourself and not come up with something good. But if you're just forced to just hammer it out, there it is. And, the crowd reacted well to it. And I remember when I won the first round, I was like, oh, man, no way. Because I expected to be voted out. Like, I didn't expect to hang. So I remember jumping on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, my God, I just won the first round of the art fight ISCA. And it just kept going on. And not like that, I kept working up again, like, through the ranks. And I'm like, okay, I'm in, like, the second round. I'm in the semifinals. Like, oh, my God, I'm going up against Dan Botero, who is, like, my roommate. So that was weird.
That was crazy. I know. We saw that, and we're like, these guys have been like boys for forever, and they're like, it's like watching like Shawn Michaels against Marty Jannetty, which if people don't know, that those guys were like the Rockers, a huge tag team. But it's kind of like that. It's kind of like
right.
So
right, like a friendly competition, but it's just funny that it came down to that in the semifinals. And yeah, just I was like surprised I beat him out, and and then I beat went up against Teague in the final round.
Yep.
And his stuff was just phenomenal throughout the entire art fights, like highly graphic, nicely rendered, really good line quality. That stuff I remember just popped and it was funny, and I was like, oh man, he's gonna whoop my ass. And again, somehow, I mean, I beat him out, and I don't know what it was. I still can't tell you to this day my strategy or what got me to that point.
There is none.
You
don't have a You can't have a strategy in art fight. That's what makes it so special.
Exactly. So I mean, I definitely owe it to the audience who applauded me all the way to the victory there. So yeah, that was a great experience. And funny thing about that too, I don't know if you're going to bring up this year's art fight.
Yeah.
But during the 2013 art fight, me and Lar D'Souza went head to head for one of the rounds, and we'd had a bit of a rivalry all year long after that, because there was that audience applause was very, very close, and I think Lar probably could have taken that one, but I think there was a bit of an underdog status on my side that sort of put me over the top. So we've been joking around a bit, he's been talking about rematch and this and that, and it was kind of cool this year that the same thing happened, where I was, still like, oh man, I was expecting I'd get booed off the stage for being a champion. I don't have the underdog status on my side anymore. I'm the reigning champ. They're gonna hate me,
Well,
and
that's the crazy part, Tom. Based off of what I had seen in previous years, most of the champs do get booed off stage. People are like, oh, we don't want to see you win again. You did that last year, but with you, I think it's like a testament to what you said, being like the people's champ, that you made it into the final round again this year. No one saw that coming.
Didn't expect it this time for entirely different reasons, like you said. It just seems like a natured sort of passing of the torch. It's not going to be something that you can win 2 years in a row. And ultimately it wasn't. I made it to the final round against Lar D'Souza, who, as I mentioned, we were in a friendly rivalry regarding the previous year's art fight. And, he took it, and it was, a gracious, passing of the torch that, he earned it. And, respectfully, we shook hands, we hugged it out, and now he is reigning champ.
Yeah, and I gotta say, that belt looks really good, especially when he's dressed as Sailor Bacon. Which,
right.
For those of you that weren't at the convention this past year, Lar D'Souza does the Comic-Con circuit. He has a webcomic called The Least I Could Do that he illustrates, and I believe was it for a charity or a cause of some sort? Do you recall?
Yeah, I believe it was raising money for MS research.
Right. Lar D'Souza dressed up in cosplay, which is when people dress up like superheroes or anime characters, and he's Sailor Bacon, a takeoff of Sailor Moon with a dash of bacon. If you guys if you guys want to visualize that, definitely Google it. I'm sure there's hundreds of images of him up on Google somewhere. But
there are. I've looked.
I'm sure you have. Anyways, Tom, so we're gonna wrap it up here. So, kind of in closing, Tom, it sounds like, this year there's no way you're not going to be able to attend the convention in Sandusky, considering it's in your backyard.
I'll be there for sure.
What I would like to do to close it out is I'm going to start asking each interviewee one question mainly to close it out. Who are you following right now? Who's the one artist that does caricatures that's really kind of standing out to you at this very moment?
You know what? Just off the top of my head right now, I've been working a lot with Rob Brent this past year with his company, In Your Face Creative Studios. We go out on the road, and we've been, drawing live at fairs and festivals and that sort of thing. But, besides that, seeing the stuff he's doing digitally, it just every one after the other is just blowing my mind.
Beautiful work. Rob is not only is he a very very kind and giving guy, but he's one of the most talented artists I've had the pleasure of meeting. And he started doing caricatures back in 2007. So he's still kind of a new kid on the block, yet he's producing amazing illustrations.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of go head to head and keep pace in the live realm, but his digital work is far beyond anything that I can achieve at the moment. So I'm kind of like looking at what he does, and I'm like, oh man, I got to get to that level. Him and Derek Brennan as well. Another good friend of mine, but just seeing the constant, step up in quality that he puts out every time he does a digital drawing.
Those guys
really blows my mind and really makes me strive to do better. And I've been doing a lot more digital work, largely in part because of those guys and their influence.
That's good. That's what it's all about. It's all about drawing inspiration from not only the people you admire, but the people you care about and like. And I know Derek and Rob both are amazing guys. And it's funny you mentioned that. They're also Ohioans, like you and myself.
Yep.
So that's pretty interesting right there.
Yeah. Me and Derek, we started out at Cedar Point around the same time. He was working there a year before me, so we were, co-workers, we're buddies. So maybe it's a little lame for me to throw shout-outs to my friends, but it's true. It's because I watch these guys and I try and keep pace with them because they're so directly influential with my life and the direction I'm going right now.
Oh, totally. I can definitely see that. Hey, so Tom, before we hop off here, do you have a website, Facebook, Instagram, anything you want to plug for those of those listeners out there?
You can go find me on Instagram or Facebook under Tom Faraci Art.
All right, and that's Faraci, correct?
Correct.
All right. Hey, Tom, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm sure we will hear from you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the call and, being able to be a part of this.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, man. Well, that wraps up our pilot episode of the ISCAST. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. And before I get off here, I just want to let you all know about a few of the things we got lined up for this year, stuff to get you really pumped and excited. So this year, if you are a professional or gold member, which is a paying member of ISCA, not only will you be receiving our quarterly magazine, Exaggerated Features, in the mail, but you will also be receiving an emailed newsletter, which will be coming out monthly. It'll update you on all kinds of cool things going on in the world of caricature, updates on the ISCAST and what kind of guests we have and what we've got going on. And, it's just going to be a great way to kind of enrich the membership experience because, let's face it, we need more and more stimulation every waking minute, and we are here to give it to you. So, yeah, you get a magazine, you get a newsletter, and we've got a few other surprises lined up, so I hope you stay tuned and stick around because it's going to be a wild ride. Until next time, this is Nolan Harris signing off. Thank you for joining the ISCAST, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.